again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John. Thank you as always for being here. Good one. Let's go. People of Reddit, what's the creepiest encounter you've had while working the night shift? Paranormal, supernatural, or other? Please remember to like, share, say hi, and subscribe. I work at a nursing home and have seen and been followed by a man during my night round. Two old bedbound ladies living there saw the same man in their rooms the same night he was following me. I went and checked the men that could walk on their own to see if they had gotten up, but they were asleep. Years ago, I worked as a manager in a small grocery store, so I was often there super late by myself after closing to finish things up. My supervisor and another employee told me that I probably wouldn't want to stay too late there by myself because they said it was haunted and that sometimes you could hear a buggy rolling through the aisles. I thought they were joking and trying to freak me out as I was new to the position and was only just then starting to close up the store by myself. Well, one night, after a particularly busy day, I had more to do than usual after close and was there until about 1 a.m. by myself. By this point, I had forgotten all about what they had said, and then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a buggy rolling down the next aisle over. I looked and there was nothing there, so I did a lap and checked all around the whole store. Nothing. As soon as I started working again, I heard it again. That time, I knew there was nothing there could be making that sound. I ignored it and hurried to finish up, while it was basically following me across the store, always the next aisle over. I was fine until I was ready to leave and was headed toward the front when I saw a bag of chips lying on the floor that had fallen off the end cap. I picked them up and put them back in place, and as soon as I did, something else fell about 5 feet away down the aisle. When I started toward it, something else fell about 5 more feet ahead of the first thing, and I stood there watching a chain of stuff fly off the shelf all the way down the aisle to the other end. I ran down a different aisle to the front door, then realized I needed to set the alarm, so I went back into the store a little ways to put the code into the security system, which was mounted on the wall across from the registers. The code wasn't working, even though it was absolutely correct. And then I heard a phone ring. Not the store phone or mine, but one of the register phones. Each of the 5 registers had a phone that didn't receive incoming calls to the store. They were only used for the intercom or to call other phones in the store. There was one in the produce room at the back and one in the manager's office, and also in the back, but on the opposite side, and they all had unique codes to dial. So, after the first register phone rang and stopped, a different register rang and stopped. Then I heard the produce one in the back, and then all of them started ringing at once. All the while, I'm trying to set the alarm, and it finally worked, so I got the hell out of there. I told my supervisor about it later, and he was just like, "Yep, I told you." The phone thing hadn't happened that badly to him, but he believed me because one time he'd had 1 or 2 of them go off before when he was leaving. I still worked there for almost a year after that, and every now and then odd things would happen, but not as much like that night. Worked on the oncology floor of a local hospital. It was divided into 2 hallways with nurses' stations, offices, and break room in the middle. One hallway was always off and darker than the other. I avoided working that side if at all possible and always tried to have a buddy with me. So many things happened there. I'll try and list the ones that stand out the most. Obviously, there was a lot of death. That, in itself, didn't bother me. I took it as a job was to help make them comfortable and peaceful in their transition. But it always came in multiples of 3 every single time. If a patient passed, we started trying to figure out who the next 2 would be. I remember a few times we got to 4 and realized that there would be 6 that day. It was never just 1 or 2. Not really supernatural, but it was disturbing. The dark hallway had one room that was really, really bad. There was a vinyl padded chair in there, and once one of our regular patients started screaming and telling someone to get away from them. We run in the room, don't see anyone, and hear the distinctive noise of something shifting in the chair. It had an impression in it, just like someone sitting. It stayed like that for 3 days until she died, then went back to normal. Patients definitely see loved ones in the days and hours before death. Every single one would talk about it. In a way, it's comforting, knowing you're not alone, but still nerve-wracking. I've had patients introduce me to their ghost family. You just have to smile and acknowledge them. Lots of call lighting going off in empty rooms, not just call lights, but emergency alarms, IVs, beeping, etc. It's a little crazy when the whole floor of nurses run to an empty room with a crash cart. Lots of voices whispering your name, things moving and falling, etc. Sometimes you'd hear people calling for help, go in, and they're asleep or no one is there. The classic rule of three, so I guess it applies to that as well. So, I would expect if some place is going to be haunted, an oncology wing to be one of the places that would see that more often. How about you guys? I work security at a casino, so when we had the shutdown, they didn't turn off the machines. No one was there at 3 a.m., but I've heard machines randomly say crap. The creepiest feeling is that the whole casino is still going, and you feel like someone is watching you the entire time. Not just surveillance, of course, while absolutely no one is there. Sometimes cars pull up to try to get out to see if it's still open, but there's that off chance you think someone is going to rob the place. A side note, people come in to play in the casinos and they die while playing. This is why you're never allowed to sleep in a casino. We were the creepy ones. I worked at a late night pizza spot. Our dumpster was in an alleyway colloquially called Get Mugged Alley. A new dough maker dumped an entire batch of dough in our dry storage trash can. It was there from 10 a.m. until around 4 a.m. when we closed down and found it. 18 hours of proofing. The trash can was bloated out of shape. There was about 200 pounds of dough. We had to bag it up 8 times because the trash bags kept breaking. Me and one coworker had to haul it out to the dumpster. It was very lumpy, but evenly distributed over the size of the trash bag, about 5 feet. Checked the security camera. 100% looked like we were hauling a body. Worked in a nursing home for 3 years, mostly evening, but night shift for a year, so I have multiple LOL. It was a fairly small place, 3 floors of residence and the basement, time clock, break room, storage, dietary and such. So, one night I go to clock out for lunch and I see another CNA from another floor doing the same. And we hear a phone, old school Rotary, ringing in the distance. People sucked at transferring calls, but I figured it was coming from the director of nursing's office at the way end of the hall. The girl goes to the break room while I go outside to chain smoke. When I came back in, I hear the phone ringing again and see the girl again. And she's like, yeah, the phone never stopped ringing. At this point, we're both a little on edge, but I was trying to find a logical solution to make myself feel better. So I bravely asked the girl to come with me for protection, LOL. And we go down that slightly crooked hallway, kind of zigzagged a bit. We get about 3/4 down the hall, obviously the ringing becoming more clear, and we get more to the storage rooms, which isn't used much. I look at her and start to say something like dismissive like, see, we were scared for nothing, and mid-sentence the phone stopped ringing. Needless to say, we both said F this and ran back to our floors. Here's where it sounds super made up. Trust me, I've told this story many times and gotten the same looks every time. So the next day I did an evening shift and the nursing supervisor asked for help getting something out of the storage room. We get there, she unlocks the door, and I accidentally was like, F that. I looked around the room like 10 times, but there was only one phone there, and it wasn't plugged in. Needless to say, I never went in that room again. All I'll say is that in those 3 years, I saw and heard some weird shit, especially from the memory care patients. This was the one that bothered me the most though. You definitely get the usual suspects, like seeing people standing in a resident's room only to look back and nothing be there. I've had call bells go off even though the PT can't move. The ones that always got me were with the memory care patients. Dementia has severity levels and usually gets worse at night, so someone who's a little confused during the day really amps up at night. So we had these 2 adorable ladies that would sit by the nursing station and talk shit about the CNAs, like how big their asses were, lol. One night, it's just them and me, and they're looking down the hallway asking each other, who's that man? I don't think he's supposed to be here. I was half listening, assuming it's just the sundowners. Plus, you get used to hearing them say odd things. Then one of them wheeled over to me and asked, hey Frank, not my name, but you eventually answer to any name, lol. Who's that man? The one in the black hat, as she points to a doorway in front of me with no lights on. One of my favorite people, very sweet woman who was diagnosed schizophrenic, she plastered her walls with childlike crayon drawings of the tall man and 12 kids, which were just a head and a torso. She told us all the story, which was, they're my brothers and sisters, but the tall man ate their limbs and he just likes watching them dance. And then, one night, me and my work wife were getting out late, so like 1:30 a.m., and when we passed by her room, she's sleeping, sitting up, arms stretched out like on a crucifix, just muttering under her breath. Not paranormal necessarily, but she did creep us out, lol. Again, very sweet and polite woman though. So, those were the big ones, but other than that, it's mainly like you could have sworn you heard a hello or something, but both residents were asleep, or just feeling something watching you, although both of those could come with tiredness and paranoia. I don't personally think it, or at least all of the time, but it is possible. The idea of the image of that woman sitting up sleeping with her arms out like that is pretty creepy in the middle of the night. Yeah, good one. Haven't really experienced anything, but occasionally during night shift I have to go underground, well, basement, and walk quite a bit to get to the other building. I work in a hospital, basically things that need to be sterilized, need to go to another hospital across the street, and certain things we're not allowed to transport across the street in case something gets damaged, bumpy sidewalk, roads, or if you lost control of something, you're pushing it and it hits a car or something. So yeah, usually around 3 a.m., down to the basement and through something that reminds you of a fallout bunker. That bunker type hall all the way until you reach the other hospital. Plus the morgue is down there too. 4 out of the 5 night shifts, I have to do this shit. Every effing time. I've watched 28 Days Later. I don't like this shit. So I never talked about it because I think that if you talk about weird stuff, you attract weird stuff. Well, I'm screwed. So back when I was a teenager, I was getting bullied all the time, had no friends. My parents always tried to F me up and basically I lived a miserable life. One night I was in my bed and I whispered to myself that I just want something to show me some affection, and I don't care what it was and where it comes from. I didn't have to wait long. I always sleep on my sides with covers between my legs, so one leg was never fully covered. One night I feel like something drags their hand really fast, starting from my ankle through the inner side of my leg, my stomach, and between my breasts. I jumped because that scared the living shit out of me. I knew I wasn't sleeping because it was super difficult for me to fall asleep back then. This happened every time whenever I forgot to cover my leg, so I couldn't imagine or dream it. After one incident, I lie on my back and whispered to whatever it was, telling it to stay away from me, that it's not welcome here, and that I don't want it to touch me ever again. That's where it stopped. It's been many years, and even though I don't believe in the paranormal, I still can't find a reasonable explanation for what happened, though I find it kind of funny how it wouldn't happen if my body was fully covered. Maybe our bedsheets do protect us from monsters after all. Way back to when I was around 10 or so, I played Club Penguin on my computer in my room. I remember one day being in my igloo arranging my furniture when suddenly my pointer on the screen was acting really strange. It moved as if it were battling with someone else over control of my mouse. I thought the mouse had been glitching out and something was wrong with it, so I let it go. The pointer on the screen was moving on its own at this point, and I stared in confusion as to why it moved as if it was a person were moving it. The pointer went towards the chat box at the bottom of the game, and words started typing by themselves. Now, mind you, this happened a while ago, so what I quote isn't exactly what the person said, but I do know the general idea of what he had typed. I remember the person had said hello as their first word. I was kind of freaked out, so I asked, "Who are you?" The person started typing random gibberish until he erased everything and said, "Can you open Notepad?" Of course, my idiot self thought that he meant in real life because I thought I was communicating with a ghost in my room the whole time. After getting the in real life notepad with a pencil, I sat in anxious wait. About a minute passed by until the pointer on the screen moved again, but this time the person minimized the screen, typed in Notepad in the Windows search bar, found the Notepad application, and opened it up. I felt like an idiot for not realizing that's what they meant. The person typed, "I don't have much time. Where do you live?" I knew giving out my personal information on the internet was a big no-no, thanks Club Penguin and Wizard 101, so I replied, "United States." To answer his question, yet not give any details, I asked, "What about you?" And he said, "In a castle somewhere far." He added, "Other people live with me here. Will you live with me? We could be friends." I thought, wow, a castle? Friends? Sure. But I wanted to hide my excitement. A little bit after that, the person said, "I have to go. He's coming. Talk to you later." I told the person bye, and for the rest of the day I eagerly waited for my mouse to move on its own again. It never did after that day. I was sad. Looking back, I realized that I had most likely gotten hacked or something, but I was too young to realize what was happening. Again, here's a story that has a great setup to build a world on, to continue that mystery, to see if there's like a parallel dimension, parallel universe, or just something beyond our understanding. What do you guys think? I like this one. My boyfriend and I used to live in a 100-plus-year-old warehouse turned into industrial lofts. It was definitely haunted. While my boyfriend is a total skeptic, I've always believed in the supernatural. He works nights and I work days, so most nights I was alone in this giant loft trying to sleep through the night. I would constantly hear footsteps in our kitchen, phantom knocks on the door, and the original wood floors were intact. Constant creaking was always present. One night, there was one of those knocks on the door, but this one was a little different. Both of our cats sat incredibly still and stared at the door, while our little dog was holding a long, drowned-out growl. This was highly unusual, so I snuck quietly to the door and peeped out the hole. I couldn't see anyone at first, but I made out what looked like the top of the head of a child. She had one knocked once, so I was waiting for another, maybe more frantic knock. It was late, maybe midnight, so I thought it was strange to get a knock at the door from a child that didn't seem to be an emergency. I stood at the door and pressed my ear against the wood to listen. All I could hear was a quick breathing. I pulled my head away and heard a softer knock, and saw a shadow pace under the door. I looked through the peephole again and saw nothing. I waited a bit longer and then opened the door to look out in the hallway. I saw the tip of a white dress hem and long black hair of a small girl turn the corner. Kinda creeped out, I went back into the apartment and locked and bolted the door. Later that night, my boyfriend got back kinda late from his bar job. Turns out he spontaneously started chatting with the front desk security guard who had been working there for over 15 years. Apparently, the place has a lot of paranormal activity from all of the deaths that happened during the building of the warehouse, as well as when it functioned as a warehouse. One story in particular was of a small girl who had come to visit her father at work at the warehouse in the 1930s. She somehow got crushed by an object that fell off a high shelf somewhere on the 9th floor. It said her ghost heavily haunted the east side of the 9th floor. We lived in the west side of the 9th floor. The security guard said if you let her in when she knocked, she would constantly be a disturbance in your home as you invited her inside. However, most of the sightings were of her strolling around the hallway. There were quite a few of these encounters. We only lived there for a year, but I am now 100% sure that ghosts exist due to the amount of encounters we had. In my first year of college, I used to hike on the Appalachian Trail by myself. I would usually go out on Friday with a small tent and enough food to last me a day or two. Once I was about a day's walk into the trail when I realized that someone was following me. He had a long beard and unkempt hair, and it was hard to tell how old he was. I've never been more scared in my life. He just followed me for several miles. I didn't say anything to him, but at some point I decided that I was going to have to fight for my life. All of a sudden I realized he was gone, and I've never felt more relieved. About 2 hours later, he appeared ahead of me on the trail, and he just sat there. I couldn't figure out how he got ahead of me, but he must have gone around through the woods. I turned around and ran for about an hour before I came across another hiker, a tall male with a gun. He took me back to my car, and I reported it to the rangers. The weirdest part is that the rangers told me that there were people in the mountains that were only half human. He said that they were inbred, and that if I saw them again that I should run immediately.